So if you still have your contribution, please get up and vote. We want to help shape these sessions for tomorrow.
Someone already put your idea.
Sorry?
Has someone already put your idea on the stick?
Yeah, I actually put one already in. Ah, cool. Thank you. Also, if you have, some ideas, some plus ones that you want to give, then we're going to do this thing where we're just going to see what type of topics we can discuss tomorrow. Once you're done, we're going to continue with lightning talks by Jordan, Monica, Thomas, and Jarko. So now we're going to be talking about the landscape of WebVR authoring tools for lightning talks, and then again open to discussions. Okay.
All right.
Anything you need, let us know.
All right.
Thank you.
Yes, I do have the new Firefox background, by the way. It's pretty cool. Cool. Okay, hi, I'm Jordan from the Google WebXR team, and I'd like to share with you some cool tools that we use or I'm aware of, just to get like an overall just landscape of these tools. And to specify, these are different than the authoring tools that some other people are talking about. So to classify, these are framework agnostic. And generally used to debug deeper platform features. So if some framework you're using has an issue and you're just getting layers and layers deep, you usually want to use these platform debugging tools, usually involved around WebGL or WebVR. And the debugging requires no knowledge of these tools. Someone can just send you a URL and you can just debug it. You don't need to care about how they made it, what they made it in. So these are very similar to native dev tools like the inspector console. So first off, within Firefox developer tools, there's two tools that may be useful for WebVR debugging. The first is the Canvas debugger. This lets you just step through draw cause, and it hooks into your request animation frame, your RAF. So you just open it up. It ships within Firefox. So you just click a button and it records a whole frame of all your draw cause. This is great for figuring out why something is, what you're doing in GL that's causing something to draw. Shader editor. So also in Firefox DevTools, there is real-time shader editing. And you can also select different programs in your GL state and highlight them within your scene. So you can see which objects in your scene are powered by different programs. The WebGL Inspector, this has been around for 5 or 6 years. This is a Chrome extension. It kind of does everything. It's a visual representation of your GL state, things like your buffers, programs, textures, and it really does require an understanding of WebGL, unfortunately. There's no abstraction around it. It's all this information. It's quite a bit. And a more modern Chrome extension, Spectre.js, made by the Babylon folks. It's very similar to WebGL Inspector, except it has like a few different features, something to try out. And a WebVR specific one, Jama the Spite, made this WebVR extension. This creates a polyfill that's injected into your code, and gives you a GUI to control your VR display and move it around and handle stereoscopic rendering. Some caveats: this always polyfills the APIs, which could be an issue if you're debugging WebVR support or working on the polyfill itself, or something like that, in which case you have to disable the extension. And it may be missing a few features from 1.1, the 1.1 WebVR API. I'm not too sure. So all these tools, these are overview of these platform debugging tools, and pretty much all of them have been WebGL specific, other than the WebVR Chrome extension. So I guess what I'm hoping to get from this this conversation is what can browser vendors or tool makers, how can we make XR specific tools? So we talked earlier today about the new XR 2.0 spec and how we're implementing AR features here. So we have these WebAR browser prototypes out there, and Mozilla is doing something very similar. So working on these code, we had to make our own tool to polyfill the API, as well as pulling out your phone, connecting with ADB. Every time you want to make a change, it just got a bit much. So we made this tool that injects the API. We can create a scene that has these virtual surfaces. So in this example, placing like this little Arctic fox, and this is just running in desktop. And we can also get the information from the VR display, like the rotation. There's some controls that let you move around this environment. And also can change camera intrinsics, like the user height or the field of view. So this is something that we've been hacking on. It's not yet released yet. This is like a sneak peek. And the AR prototype browsers, they're not standardized, not at all. And so maybe this is something we'd explore more with the XR 2.0 release next year. But yeah, like I said, wanted to start a discussion. How can people that create tools, how can we make tools that better support VR developers specifically for VR XR issues rather than just more WebGL tooling? I think that was 5 minutes. Thanks.
Hi everyone, my name is Monica and I'm a software engineer at Archeologic in Zurich. We work on bringing the 3D to the web, more specifically architecture. We make a bunch of architectural tools, not just for architects, but for also regular people to use in their own applications, whatever they might be. How many of you are familiar with A-frame and A-frame components? Most of you. Okay, so I won't spend much on that. I'll just show what we are doing and how it fits in. So most of you know A-frame. It's a web framework which allows us to very easily create VR experiences on the web. It's great because it has an easy way to put together different components, different elements to create scenes very easily. You all probably know this basic Hello World demo. That's basically just a few objects in a scene. But what if you want to make something more complicated? Because this is nice, but not exactly entirely useful. So that's where components come in. And components in A-frame, they allow us to add functionality or change appearance or functionality of whatever 3D elements we have in the scene. There are a bunch of components that come built in with A-frame, and a lot more that are community created that you can use in your application also very easily. So, as I said, you can modify the appearance, behavior, functionality, and you can also use components within components. So it's very nicely modular. Components allow us to encapsulate JavaScript code and access browser functionality also such as speech recognition API, etc. And then we can use these components declaratively from HTML. So at Archeologic, we have started with making basically 3D visualizations, but that's not very scalable and so on. So what we have come up with is 3D.io, which is an architectural toolkit, which allows us to display scenes, furniture, architectural elements in VR scenes, and use APIs that we have to furnish these spaces or modify 3D objects. Some of the examples that we have now are things such as a wall, door, kitchen, railing, closet, whatever. That we are adding more and more A-frame components. These are all A-frame components. We are going to release them very soon. Some of them have already been released. But then you can use them very easily in your A-frame scenes. Like there are a few examples here. So you can set all sorts of properties there. For example, for the door here, you can set where you want the hinge to be, what kind of door type to want, etc. You can change materials. So then a whole example looks something like this. I hope it's visible also for the people in the back. If not, okay, perfect. So what we have there is a very basic scene in which we have a sky, and then we use a room entity into which we build walls, and another wall with a door and a floor. So it's a very basic room which does not have the front wall. And yeah, it doesn't do much. But what we also can do then is access these elements from JavaScript code and modify them and make them do things. So in JavaScript, we can just select the room and convert these A-frame components into structure that we internally use in Archeologic to then further use it. In our case, to get furniture and put it back into the scene. So for you to see what exactly it looks like all together. So here's the code. It's exactly what I showed, and I'm going to open it in the browser. And I don't have internet, so we don't get the furniture. But I forgot to log into the internet. If we had internet, we would get furniture set in the room that fits the room. But basically, this is what we now have, and you can use it in whatever application you have. So,
Monica,
yes?
do you want me to set the internet up?
Oh no, it's okay. I could. Yeah, I'm not sure, but anyways, we'll be doing demos tomorrow, so you can also come see what we do. Yes, so then the results are virtual tours which you can modify in any way you want. You can add waypoints, you can add tours, you can add tags in which you tag different places, add more information into the tags such as videos or pictures, etc., and use this all in VR. And it all works really nicely whether you're using Daydream or Cardboard, and yeah, that's it.
Okay, hello, Fabian. So I'll present React VR. So I am the Lucid Web CTO. That's where you can enjoy, thanks to us, the delicious coffee today. I'm a Web VR developer, and I'm a Mozilla contributor. Missing part of it, but that's fine. Focusing mostly on A-frame, but I will take another perspective today. I'll present you React VR. How many of you actually, since we did a little show of hands before to stay well awake, how many of you have tried React VR? Okay, how many of you, keep the hand up. How many of you have written a component for React VR? Okay, how many of you have used somebody else's component in React VR? Okay. Okay, that's it. No, I'll still present it. So first, super easy to start. Assuming you have Yorn, you actually go start it, go have your coffee, and in 2 lines, you create your boilerplate project and then add somebody else's component. That's how easy you can start it. If the value proposal of React VR is there is such a large community of React developers, they already all know the management of state. So if you are used to mounting components, managing the props and steps, that's all the vocabulary you already know. So it's the same kind of view you had before with A-frame. So you will define your components, but using JSX. The stack itself, so it's React VR built on React Native for now, at least. It's still using 3JS and WebGL, because the idea, again, the principle is, yes, you're using the basis of developer from React, but then writing once and having your content available everywhere, including on native. For now, at least, the native part is available only within Facebook, but discussion of opening it. But for WebViewer specifically, it's still using 3JS. You're familiar with this, WebGL, and the other UI specific to layout using React. The main developers, so before was Amber Roy, who was working at Outspace, who is now focusing on Oculus Go, and who gave the hand to Andrew Im. The features, so one important one is that you split between your app request or your app logic and really react to your own thread, so using its own web worker. The idea is that then you pass messages and you isolate the two and you keep your good frameworks. Also, yes, like I said, you target React Dev, huge community, you learn once and then you run everywhere. Features, so basically if the goal is to display, to have a nice layout where you can organize all your content from images to, it's basically the main target is bringing 2D interfaces to VR. Meaning it's all about layout. So you have your cylindrical layers that you have all around this content that will be displayed around you. If you do that using other frameworks, you will have to use to basically offset each of the different elements you want to build. So you need to do the layout yourself, basically. So what React is proposing is that it's handled for you. Also, hot reloading. So you can have, I'm not sure that's available freely now, but first you have hot reloading, but you also have a hot reloading within the headset. So you keep the state, you modify it, and then you have directly the new result in your headset. So you have one developer here, somebody with the HMD, and you can directly see the result. I think that's pretty fundamental, especially since we're all, no matter how expert we are, learning what VR is. So if you can tinker and explore faster and not removing the headset, since we still don't have in VR editing, if you do, come talk to me, I'm excited by this. But for the rest of us who don't do proper in VR editing, to be able to have hot reloading with HMD is pretty fundamental. So the future is actually to have it in native, because for now, again, it's only internal. That if you publish now using React VR, you publish on WebVR, which is if you want to publish for the Oculus, for the Rift, it's probably not what you might want. You want to have, yes, maybe the WebVR version, but then transition to native pure, but it's not the case yet. Since I asked before about community component and using somebody else's component, there was a very nice slide before about the different components for A-frame. I wasn't able to produce that for React VR, so I found two main ones, mostly again centered with UI and layout, which is one about basically gaze. So if you gaze on an entity, then you can have a different behavior. Another one that has a much more in-depth UI. Also, one of the most active ones who wasn't able to come today is Nick Graff. And he lists what of the different component frameworks, everything if you want to learn more about React VR. I think it's a great place to go. Some events and the reactive Slux, not a Slack, it's it's a channel to chat where I get some answers in less than 12 hours, so it's pretty active. And that's it. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Jaakko, I'm CTO advisor. With our tools you can build the immersive web with Visor. I mean, it's interesting that the community group would rename itself to what we've been calling WebVR for a few months now. It's great. So we've built 2 tools for WebVR authoring. Our first product, which we've been building since like 2011, was a visual programming language for WebGL, which we then turned into WebVR framework in 2014. It has a, in low res, it has a world editor. You can composite 3D scenes with drag and drop, and you can sort of, this is the viewer. I can move him around or her, and the planet like this, and then it has a visual programming language for defining interactions. And well, really the whole scene is, there's no scene graph, it's all, everything runs in through this graph, which has a pretty steep learning curve, really. It's easier than learning JavaScript syntax for probably most people, but you still have to learn its own domain language. So we decided to build a slightly easier editor, kind of inspired by Keynote, which looks like this. So in this editor, you can just drag and drop your 360 photos to create scenes, like so. And then, for example, if I want to add a link to the Hong Kong peak to this image, I can just drag the next scene onto the scene and move the pin around. I can create a media hotspot to add some images and text, and 3D models soon coming. This is like a super, like, very greatly simplified. Like this editor does 3 things, whereas the previous editor does 10,000 things, and starting from very easy things. So I can make a media hotspot like this, and then I can quickly publish it from the publish dialog and update the existing one. And with that, we have a published WebVR project. And one thing of note here is that when I click on the media hotspot on desktop or mobile, it actually shows on a DOM layer. So this is built with a React VR DOM layer that we've developed in VR. It shows in VR, but on desktop and mobile, it can use crisp web fonts, which was very important for us, and particularly our designer. We've also done some experience with SDF text, but haven't really gotten anything to look awesome in VR yet, which is a known hard problem, of course. The one hard problem for me that I want to solve is how to define interactions and animations easily in, for designers and developers, and for basically for anyone. The solution isn't like giving them a text editor and allowing them to write JavaScript, I don't think. And but on the other hand, like this visual programming language is also too hard. So yeah, that's kind of what I want to solve in the bigger picture. So with our editor, you can publish like this on the web very quickly, and we've done some experiments with the National Gallery in London and Oculus and Matterport to do some Facebook embeds of WebVR experiences, like so. This is the Sainsbury Wing in London, and it uses the same media hotspots on desktop. And yeah, the full experience you can see on visor.io/nationalgallery/NG. Yeah, that's all I got. Thank you very much.
So now having an overview of some of the projects that have been built and some of the technologies that are already out there, it's open to questions and discussions to people that have presented and among yourselves.
Hello, my name is Nikolai, and my question is directed to the last presenter. You told that you have problems with animations, how to make them easy. Have you ever used a tool like Adobe After Effects or some 3D program, and how do you think their solutions are applicable to your platform, probably?
But maybe that question is, or the problem is really for our designer, Matt, but I'd be interested in seeing it. Yeah, but personally, I'd like to see, like, I've been thinking about something like Lego Mindstorms and these kinds of, blocks that fit together that you can't put the wrong thing together with like A and B. They have to kind of click and match. They have to be a certain shape. But yeah, the answer still eludes me. I'd be interested in seeing it.
Still for you, actually. My name is Isabel. I have a question about the actual formats that you need in order to, the pictures or videos, I think you can actually use in Visor as well. I'm not sure.
Not
and I was
yet.
wondering if you could tell us, like, what kind of formats do the pictures need to be, for example?
Yeah, today we support Equirects, stereo Equirects are coming, so Equirects, mono Equirects, and then cube maps and stereo cube maps today.
Okay.
We're thinking about 360 video, but there's, all sorts of problems, but streaming is one of them.
Great.
And yeah, in patches you can use 360 video, but then you have to upload it to our server, and then so it doesn't stream it to the client. So when you open the experience, it has to download the whole video and then start playing it. And, yeah.
Okay. And just the last question about the accessibility to post media online. So I saw that you actually posted some stuff on Facebook.
Yeah.
Is there any other social media accounts where Visor is actually used as well, or is able to use?
We're looking into Twitter cards at the moment, but I don't think they support like HTML5 embeds, basically. But via Embedly and OEmbed support, we can be embedded into almost anything, WordPress, blogs, and
Okay.
any website, really.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Jaakko, this is a question for you, but for everyone who's presented. Amazing work with Visor, by the way, as an authoring tool from the early days to now, but quite a significant shift from the 3D authoring tool to the 360.
Yeah.
And I think this is a challenge for everyone here, is how adoption, how do we get people into using the technology? And I wondered if it was more from an audience perspective or trying to find developers, why you made that pivot. And I'd be interested in anyone else's perspective on, how we can get more audience in more easily and what components we need to step people in. But again, amazing stuff, and I'd love to hear your comments.
Thanks. Yeah, I agree. Well, there's two sides of the problem. There's people aren't interested in generating WebVR content and they're not interested in viewing WebVR content because, well, a multitude of problems, but they're basically, you have to solve both sides. You know, where's the compelling content and where can I put it on, like, why should I create this content? Yeah, embedding in blogs is one thing, but like the Facebook newsfeed is very important for us, and for a lot of people, just these days don't browse the web, but they scroll their Facebook newsfeed, get their news from it, and like consume most of their media really on Facebook newsfeed. Yeah, and then so once you get this compelling content kind of for like solved for WebVR, then I guess the tools kind of go after that. For us, we didn't really see a lot of usage for the patches because it's too hard. You have to have 3D assets. Nobody really has 3D assets. Like regular people definitely don't. They might have some 360 photos, and we did this sort of microsite that is literally a 360 photo drop site, and so you just drag and drop an image there, and you get a URL, shareable WebVR URL, and that we did see some usage with, because people do have some of those assets, and that's where the kind of the new editor came from. It's like, yeah, okay, you have 360 photos, now you can tell stories with them in WebVR.
Thank you.
To follow up on that, I'm Kathy Trigolo. I'm with the WebVR studio out of Boston. Do you have any information on who your users are, particularly for the new authoring tools? Do you have a sense of what your audience is there?
Currently, so there's 3 verticals that we're focusing on the most. One is games. Game previews is pretty cool with NVIDIA Ansel. You can take 360, even stereo cube map. Screenshots of games are not even available in VR, and you can show them like, this is what it would look like in VR with stereo. The other is architecture, and another is journalism. For 360 storytelling, it's journalism could probably be a pretty big one.
Yes, I have a question for the first presenter from the debugging tools and the React VR person. I was wondering if any one of you has some experience with coding in VR, because you have this hot reloading stuff, but at this moment when I'm developing, I have to put on the VR headset all the time.
Do you mean like an experience where like you're like strapped in and you have like your IDEs like all around you, kind of a VR thing, or
yeah, something
VR
like that?
Content where you're, or the latter.
Yeah, the first thing. So where I have my ID in front of me in VR and I press reload, and then the area around me updates, something like that.
Do you want to avoid putting a headset on?
I want to avoid putting it off.
Okay. There was some, I can't remember the name. There's some people looking into like productivity apps where like, so you can have your terminal and everything, like this whole desktop environment. I don't recall the name. I guess I feel the opposite, where like if I can hack around a way to not have to put a headset on while developing it, I'll do that. So yeah, I don't know. I'll see if I can find the name of that productivity IDE, VR IDE or something. Maybe that's what it's called.
So yes, I tried. It's a pain. That's actually a discussion we had just before. If you used Logo or Scratch, I think that's the way to go. Because typing so far is still a pain. So if you can have blocks of components, of entities, and it's actually to kickstart that process is super quick. Because basically you expose your framework, so you can even do it programmatically, and then you snap the objects together. There are some exploration for it. The best one, in my opinion, now is using Anyland. It's a social experience, and you have in-view editing in there. As soon as you have to type, that's a pain, but that's still okay. As soon as you have to type, actually, like curly brackets and everything. So as much as you can go from component to visual, and that the visual, or not just visual, but have the syntax embedded in it. So that's why the Scratch and the logo syntax is so interesting. If it's not the right syntax, it doesn't snap. If it does snap, and then you have the results straight away. It's still on WebVR itself. There are a few toy projects, including the one from Kevin Engo from Mainframe, including the one from I forgot his name, but a designer also at the MoseVR team. But to kickstart, we have all the elements literally for it. Like we have all the blocks for it. Then to make it social. So yeah. So that's why I also added a post-it on this for in-VR editing. If there is a discussion for it, I'm all in. There is, yeah, all the blocks are there. Now it's the pain as long as you have to type, from our experience.
Well, for my own development, I'm Daniel, by the way, from the Netherlands, working on some WebVR projects and setting up with Marco here the Dutch WebXR community. But for my personal development, I just use Node live server, and it refreshes every time I make a change. And I'm asking my colleague right now, because we have a live editor, and I can demo it if you want to, but on which we just do add a line of code in the browser, and it automatically gives you an environment. So I don't think it's very difficult to. Yeah, but even with typing, it's just.
That was on ACE.
Sorry.
With ACE.
With the ACE ACE editor. So.
So I might be hacking the discussion a little bit, but question raised by the lady made me think of something. Last year in San Jose at the WebVR workshop, we talked about standardization for formats. So that might be a question for you, Dom. I don't know if maybe somebody else can answer, but what about standardization for images? Like Jaco talked about cube maps. So how do you know the order of cube maps? Like, you know, the first image is the bottom one or the top one, these kind of things. And same thing for video files, for left, right, or top, bottom, these kind of things. So it was a question of doing things about it last year. So I wanted to know if we could have an update on this, or maybe that will be talked about later in this workshop. I don't know.
So if it's going to be talked about later, I don't know. And actually, I don't think there has been much progress on this. Clearly, as you say, there were several points of discussions on where and how these formats needed to be standardized. In some cases, it's only standardizing the metadata. In some cases, you need to standardize the packaging. In some cases, you need to standardize the format itself. And to my knowledge, there were supposed to be follow-up in IETF, but I haven't heard about them. There is a GLTF work in Chronos, which I think has been gaining some traction. But yeah, that's as much updates as I have at the moment, I'm afraid.
I just got a reaction of Ruben van der Leun, one of my colleagues I'm working with, and he is developing a hot reload for A-frame component right now. But it's not for development right now, for use yet. So for the A-frame users, in a few weeks, months.
Hello, it's again Nikolai from the LensVR team. My question is directed to both browser vendors and to also React VR developers. The thing that A-frame has an edge at the moment, I think, is their visual debugger, the scene debugger. This is I've developed for React VR, and it was something which was missing a lot, because when you're in 3D space and you cannot debug the 3D space fast enough, it is a problem. I think it also could be solved at browser level with some tool. I know it depends, but framework developers should also think about their debugging tools and their availability.
I'm not really speaking with my browser vendor hat on here, just as a VR developer. Something that's worth keeping an eye out for is the 3.js inspector for Chrome, which is really good. Allows you to inspect a 3.js scene, very handy. Unfortunately, I think it's probably not something a browser vendor could build in the browser, at least with WebGL, just because it's so low level. I mean, WebGL draws triangles. So beyond what's like looking at the individual draw calls, I think having an abstraction to the scene beyond that is not super feasible.
I just add to here also that I think that this is nothing should be in browser level, because that will put developers like kind of into limitations if vendors will start kind of defining or driving the APIs in the direction that they could provide such inspectors in browser level universally.
Yeah, just a quick note. I mean, you could probably use the 3JS inspector with React VR, because it's using the React VR web is using 3JS to render, but I haven't used it, but just an idea.
No, I had another question before another person. Hi again, guys. Just a question to, actually, it was both to Kathy, well, more as a question, kind of like an hypothesis, rather, and also to Jaakko, because we were talking about like who our audiences are as web developers, but more importantly as creators. I'm a producer in creation, in content and stuff, and obviously like one of my main goals is to believe who is my audience in order to be able to make compelling content, in order to be able to know how to monetize it. So obviously, like I already like talked about, like there's financing and monetizing, because obviously that seems to be one of the challenges that we are facing today as web VR developers, creators, and everything like that. So I've done my little bit of research, if I can put it into brackets, because obviously there's so much more that we still need to look and focus on. And some of the people that obviously are our main audiences at the moment is obviously tech savvy and people who are into gaming and the photographers, filmmakers, creators that actually have something to develop, just like you guys. But I've also realized that there's a lot of people that seem to be interested, but the issue is that it's either not accessible to them because it's expensive, or just like me listening to you guys talk about coding, and it sounds like Chinese because I don't know anything about it. It's come to my attention that obviously like it has to become a little bit more accessible to people, in the sense of like, I don't want to say dumb it down, because we're not going to dumb anything down. We're just going to make it more accessible to people to kind of get it, grasping an idea that, hey guys, it's not just for people who know about coding, it's for you guys too. And I think part of it will be done through the marketing of this. So big vendors, but more importantly, people that have the power to basically kind of go like, hey guys, this is what we're doing. I think that is what needs to be done right now. So kind of like just tell your audiences that, hey, it's good for you too, and this is how we do it. And I know that some apps are doing it really well. I cannot name names because I'm really bad at this and I'm still learning a lot, but I just wanted to pitch that in, basically. That's what I was going to say, basically.
Kathy again, I just wanted to say I agree with you. one of the reasons that my group is doing the work that we're doing is to help get that entry level accessibility, understanding what it is. I included marketing and outreach for the potential of WebXR as one of the topics to discuss, because there is a gap, and there are many people who don't think of themselves as coders, but they can produce content. And so part of this is educating people around how do you do this, why do you do this. There have been studies, at least in the US I know, where if you look at the younger generation of students, they are interested in consumption, but they are more interested in creation. So they just need to have the tools in their hands.
Just a quick thing on this, and then to quickly go back on the in-VR editing, I think it's actually skipping the programming step entirely, because now you can already, the problem is you just need the tool. Like if you've painted already in VR, if you use Twilbrush or a painter or blocks or whatever, you don't need to think. You do the movement and then you get the result, and the same for animation. So if you can do those steps and eventually, if need be, use blocks or something like this to do the interaction, I would skip that step entirely. And the process itself is fun, but
so on the topic of making, oh sorry, Ada from Samsung. On the topic of making VR more accessible to content producers who aren't advanced graphics developers, I think bringing WebVR as a whole into HTML and CSS itself will greatly increase the accessibility of the platform. We're seeing it already through A-Frame, which is using custom elements to wrap around 3.js to allow people to author a VR site using just HTML. And I've been able to use this to teach very young children and people who have never even developed for the web before, because HTML is very accessible. And then we already have large communities of people who don't consider themselves developers, but still know how to use HTML, CSS for their job. Where I think if we can bring the level of the platform down to that in a way which will solve 95% of people's use cases, then it's going to make it a lot more available to a lot more people. But I think that's in the very long term for the platform.
Yeah, Dominic again. So first big plus one on this, I think the integration. I mean, making VR not an add-on to the web, but making it built-in into the web is a key component of making it easier for people to build content for it. We'll probably be discussing this afternoon on accessibility in the sense of access to persons with disability. It's another key aspect of it. It was discussed, as you know, last year at the VR workshop as well, and there were early ideas on how you could reuse CSS with HTML to create a 3D space in which you would be, positioning your elements. Again, I don't think there has been much progress on this since. I think the DOM texture proposal that was discussed earlier today is at least a way to approach this issue. And to me, I have no actual impact on this, but this would feel like a much more constructive way to do VR on the web than the current WebVR API, which again is great because it gets you started, but it doesn't feel like you're actually doing web development when you're doing WebVR. You're doing JavaScript and 3D development more than web development. So, I'm afraid I don't have a particular good news to report on this, but I think that's certainly a direction we should be investigating a lot more.
Okay, I'll get the mic there. Just to add something quite interesting. We've been working in the team trying to teach how try to teach non-technical people to develop experiences that are built on WebVR, people that are creatives or people that are professionals in other fields that are not related to content. And I just wanted to add that I think tools that really give the idea of the space, like for example the A-frame inspector, are key and crucial to enable people to create things and then export them. I think one of the most powerful features of something like the A-frame inspector is the fact that they can actually, let's say, 3D model, if you want to call it that way, in the inspector, and then just get the code, the code and put it on an HTML file, and that has been just grateful. That's just very good because, for example, we've been able to work with archaeologists that have been able to recreate structures of different types and sizes just working with the inspector, and I think this type of tools is what we should be enabling more to final users as well.
Just 1 second on the inspector for A-frame. Yeah, I think it's a great way. Plus, there is right now on the GitHub repository a discussion on how to expand the inspector, how to challenge it, how do we add plugins, how to hide the interface to focus on just one aspect. So yes, do come on the A-frame repository for the inspector and participate to the discussion on how to extend it or simplify it, because it is indeed a great way to get in.
Yes, hello, this is me again. I just wanted to add coding for non-coders. I actually taught the Samsung App Academy across the United States for 2 years and was teaching underprivileged high school seniors and juniors about app development for Android. And we used a tool called MIT App Inventor. And I think that you from Visor, you were talking about block style coding style for like mind maps, Lego Mindstorms, yes. Yeah, so did you think about creating some kind of JavaScript editing tool that kind of uses those kinds of blocks to match them well together? And how, if yes, then it would basically borrow itself very much to like an A-frame setup where you have different kind of colored cubes that match together, or shapes, basically like Lego pieces. And that would be kind of the translation from the 2D screen of block style coding, and then translate it into a virtual space where you can directly change and interaction and see it happening. Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about it then.
Now I have two things to say. Maybe it's an idea to get Sketch from MIT. You know, well, probably most of you know it. It's like the blocks building, to get something like that for WebVR. And the other thing is I wanted to, on the whole discussion of how to get accessibility for WebVR and building. I agree on it's mainly technical, but I've been on, I will stand up, I've doing some presentations at a big Dutch consumer technical conference, exhibition. It's called Bright Days. It's every year, it's 2 days with all the new tech stuff. And we did I did some presentations about WebVR, and most of the people who were attending the talks, like maybe 20, 25 people at the time, weren't developers but could code HTML. When I showed them, and I put on Slack the editor we used for the demo, when I showed them how easy it was, like every session 5, 6 people just came up to me. Is it that simple? So the A-frame or something like that is really important for for people, just not technical people, to start with. And maybe if we can get that better. So well, that's the experience I want to share, because people understand HTML, most of them, for a lot of people, and see how easy it is. So that's what I want to say.
Hi, My name's Scott Phillips. I'm CTO of a company called Block Zero. We're into cryptocurrencies. I'm very interested in crypto as it applies to WebVR, smart contracts, and that sort of thing. But to keep it relevant, also ran a business for a few years doing 3D printing and teaching high school students CAD modelling and 3D printing. And I'd like to do a bit of a shout out to the two tools that I used in that, which were awesome for model creation. First being Tinkercad, which was actually about to shutter its doors, and Autodesk rode in on their white horse and bought it up and turned the servers back on, which was awesome. Tinkercad. So Tinkercad is a modeling program using primitives. It's extremely drag and drop, and it has a really amazing Boolean engine in it, so you can add and subtract objects together and create, quite interesting arbitrary geometry. It's sort of mechanical modeling. It doesn't have, it's not a ZBrush alternative, for example, but you can drop in VRML objects into the scene. In fact, there's a nice little hack where you can pull in an object URL from a site like Thingiverse, which is also amazing for 3D printing and objects. Check that out if you don't know it. And you can just bring those in as you can import a URL straight into a Tinkercad scene and then slice and dice that. It's really fun. The other one is a fully parametric CAD modeling software called Onshape. And that, I believe, is created by the original developers of SolidWorks, which is industry standard in industrial design. So it's a fully parametric CAD modeling software. You can do all sorts of crazy surfaces and lofts and extrudes and all sorts of things. But I'd like to really just throw this open to the room and see what people think about both of these things. Work in browsers, by the way, I should say, and are WebGL based. But I'm just wanting people's opinion on the actual model creation side of things and how they see that panning out. I mean, these tools are really designed for 3D printing and industrial design, and I think something more specific to WebVR might be appropriate. Any thoughts?
So people that are interested in continuing this conversation and the landscape of VR authoring content can move to these two tables. The person in charge is Fabian. He will be guiding us on this topic. And if you're interested in discussing present, future of the specification, then you can move to this other side of the room where Gordon is going to be helping us and guiding us on the session. So now we break into two. Feel free to contribute. Feel free to switch tables. The idea is that we want to get all the comments and make the most out of it. So we break until lunch. Recording equipment, we can move it to here.